Marhaba. I'm Christopher Hibma, and this is Maharad, Producing in Unproductive Times by Atijahat Independent Culture, a series created for artists in the Arab region that celebrates creative producers and the skills it takes to make things happen. This week, we'll be talking about producing beyond the region with South African playwright and cultural curator Mike Van Graan. You may be joining us with the goal of presenting your work in your hometown. You may also be interested in learning about how to collaborate with artists in venues somewhere beyond the region. I am a big advocate for artists working across borders. Working with artists at Sundance Institute, I witnessed how artists evolved when they collaborated with artists from very different backgrounds, aesthetics, or styles. Many opportunities for presenting your work may come from organizations in the EU and North America. While these collaborations are invaluable, today we'll be exploring collaborations beyond these regions. What might be the value in partnering with others in East Africa, East Asia, or Latin America? I believe there are benefits to collaborating with artists from any of these regions. We've mentioned previously that most funding for performing arts in the Arab region come from Western institutions, and at first glance, having access to that funding may seem uncomplicated. However, some have argued that foreign aid to the Arab region through cultural funding can be highly politicized and limiting to artists, given that funders often set agendas for projects and prioritize particular themes, subjects, or styles over others. You may feel like they have to center a non-local audience or lens in your work. It's important to realize that as an artist from the Arab region, you have agency to present your work beyond Western Europe and North America. Today, many countries in East Africa, East Asia, or Latin America have robust cultural and performance landscapes. Collaborations between artists from the Arab region and non-Western artists are very possible. In Uganda, for example, every year, friends at the Kampala International Theatre Festival host a variety of artists from around the world, including the Arab region. Involvement in the festival includes development workshops, productions, and networking sessions with artists from all around the world. The advantages of these collaborations are numerous because they are horizontal partnerships. Horizontal partnerships refer to collaborations between groups that have similar levels of resources or and experience similar circumstances. These collaborations can thus allow artists and producers to share resources and expertise, which will allow them to explore alternative producing methodologies. Through these collaborations, artists can go beyond their traditional roles as aid recipients. In our globalized world, you can become invested in economic and public health crises elsewhere and work across these experiences because, as the COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated, we are inextricably tied. Horizontal partnerships ultimately allow parties to enter a collaboration on an equal footing, which is not always the case in collaborations when one party is offering most of the funding. You may be wondering how to find opportunities. First, tap into your network to identify any colleagues or mentors who may have worked in countries beyond the Arab region. Second, do your research. I recommend reading Howlround, a US-based global platform for theater makers which aims to amplify and share progressive and disruptive stories and perspectives about global theater. Listen to the Segal Talks, which interviewed a group of artists from one country every day for the first 32 weeks of the pandemic, asking artists what their cultural landscape looked like and how it was affected by COVID-19. Another exciting platform is the Pan-African Creative Exchange, which is creating networks across the world to grow and develop creative industries in and around the continent of Africa, and has facilitated collaborations between Africa and the Arab region. I recently chatted with South African playwright, cultural curator, and producer Mike Van Graan. Mike has worked to shape post-apartheid cultural policies in South Africa and beyond. His practice combines advocacy in cultural policy and arts activism in parallel with his playwriting and producing practice. You've done a lot of thinking and work and publishing about collaborations that happen sort of horizontally. Do you use the term Global South? Do you use the term South-South collaboration? How do you define what that means to you? What feels comfortable in your own DNA?
Yeah, I'm very much a global southerner in terms of terminology. Look, it's not necessarily a term that is it can be explained very easily, but I kind of tend to use it. I think a lot of people kind of look at the term and they say, but you're not. It's some of the countries that you refer to are not in the southern hemisphere, and you kind of have to explain. Well, global south is not about a hemispheric paradigm. It's about power. It's about relations of power. Yeah, about power relations. Where are the hegemonic kind of forces that prevail in terms of economic and political and cultural power at the moment, and where are the other countries and regions in relation to that, and that would determine what constitutes for me the global south. And in fact, I was part of an initiative a few years ago to start a global south arts and culture initiative, GLOSACI we called it. And it was about, we kind of defined the terms. If you have a look at the terms historically that people have used, third world, all of these terms that have their roots not necessarily within what we now deem to be the global south, but in places where it's been through the lens of that Western hegemonic power that I've been referencing. And so it's always kind of been, people's dignity and how people view themselves have to do also with the terminology that is used to describe them. If you're third world, if you're developing, if you're all of those other ring words, it gives people a sense of, they are lesser than. And so what we've been looking for are more empowering terms. I mean, some of our colleagues in the Global South Arts and Culture Initiative were using things like the 2/3 world. It kind of represents, well, 2/3 of the world. Actually, this is what their experience is. Or some people have used the term the majority world, and so on, to kind of say that actually what we generally understand, because of the cultural dominance and the cultural power of those who enjoy cultural and economic and political dominance, is such that they frame a lot of how the world is viewed and how we view ourselves in relation to others as well. There does need to be new terminology, and we, even if it's not comfortable terms or not the best and most perfect terms, it's about how we give meaning to those terms in order for that meaning to empower us, to make us feel good about ourselves and good in relation to those with whom we seek to engage across the globe.
Can you share a little bit with me about how what some of the joyful experiences have been in terms of collaborating with the 2/3 world, and by converse, maybe what you've experienced with, what do you call it, the 1/3 world then, or the non-majority world?
Yeah, framing others in terms of the non, right? Yeah. So in a way, a lot of this, maybe just to, before I answer your question, talk a little bit more about the first part of your question and or your comment. And that was when I was running Arterial Network. And Arterial Network was this Pan-African network of people engaged in the creative sector. Something that many people say to us could never be done, because we've never had a Pan-African network that has crossed old colonial boundaries, Anglophone and Francophone and Lusophone Africa. And yet after a couple of years, we had chapters in about 40 different African countries, I think kind of representing a need on the part of those engaged in creative practice on the continent to be connected to each other and to find ways of working together, because all of our experience, even in countries as rich as South Africa, where we do have cultural policy, where we do have public funding for the arts, our governments are not particularly supportive of contemporary artistic practice.
Right.
A, because they don't see it as being particularly important, and B, because contemporary artistic practice tends to be premised on freedom of expression, and artists ask difficult questions, and so, why do you want to support them, kind of thing. So we found this real sense of solidarity amongst each other and working across national boundaries, and then finding international partners to cooperate with us in the work that we were doing. And one of the things that we did at the time was, because of our historical kind of divisions, we tend, and because of the lack of support that we got from our governments, we tended to embrace cultural policies that emanated from the global north. Because quite often those policies came with resources attached to them as well.
Right.
So as conditions change in the global north, so cultural policy changed as well. And so we would kind of embrace those policies without necessarily interrogating their relevance to our conditions. So, one day it was culture and development, the next day it was the creative industries, the day after was climate change and the arts, the following day was intercultural dialogue and so on.
Sure.
So all these things kind of shifting, and we would take our little projects and then, what's the new kind of paradigm? Let's create our project and give it that particular meaning. So what we did as Arterial Network was just to interrogate those cultural policies and say, hey, even if they don't have meaning for us, let us understand, first of all, what our conditions are, and let us begin to frame cultural policy from within our realities, given that we ourselves are not homogenous. There are 55 countries across the continent, and even within one country like South Africa, there are fundamental differences between very urban areas and very rural areas. Even within a city like Cape Town, the disparities in the city are enormous. So, the one-size-fits-all approach, the approach that says this is the right thing to do for this particular time, just does not work in our particular conditions. And we need to change things and adapt policy and adapt the way that we do things according to the conditions that we find ourselves in.
The world is radically changing, and as artists, even if we choose to work locally, we must look intently at dynamics and problems we're facing as a global community. Building a network of peers both in your home location but also beyond the region is fundamental. Working across your differences in ideology, access, and language is the unique work that only you as an artist or cultural worker can do. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation and feel inspired to collaborate across borders on your next project. Please watch my entire river conversation with Mike at the link below. Join us on social media or comment below if you have any further questions about collaborations beyond the region. In the next episode of Maharat, we'll discuss how you self-produce your own work with Bashar Merkis and Khaloud Basil from the Palestinian theater company Khashbi. Ma'a salama.